I'm Veronica Calder, 38 years old, the youngest daughter in a family that values appearances more than people, and the woman who built the operational backbone of a logistics company most executives couldn't diagram if their jobs depended on it. I grew up learning to stay quiet while my older siblings took credit, learned early that being useful mattered more than being visible, and carried that instinct straight into a career where I fixed disasters without ever being invited into the room where decisions were announced. I've always known I was different, too precise, too cautious, too invisible, and I made peace with that long before it became a liability. What I didn't expect was that silence to be weaponized against me, or that one small gesture in a glass-walled boardroom would unravel a $970 million deal overnight and put my name at the center of a collapse no one saw coming. Because the moment I slid my business card across the table, I didn't just get laughed at, I set off something that was never meant to be stopped. 7:06 a.m. Philadelphia's Navy Yard felt quieter than usual. The rain came sideways, tapping glass like fingernails. Floor 19. Temp just above uncomfortable. I was already seated before anyone else walked in. One by one they entered. Suits too sharp. Shoes too clean. Lanyards from 3-letter firms. No one said good morning. The buyer's CEO, Lucien Kale, dropped his leather folder on the table without sitting. His team flanked him like formation flyers. To his right, Elliot Grain adjusted his cufflinks. The room exhaled when Lucien finally spoke. Let's begin. Grain stood. 34, glossy teeth, founder's nephew. Power that was borrowed, not earned. We're proud to welcome the Harwood acquisition team today, he said, voice tight with theater. This deal represents the future of our logistics innovation, and I slid the card. A simple white rectangle. Raised print. No slogan. Just my name, title, and a number they weren't supposed to have yet. Grain looked at it like I'd tossed a dead thing on the table. Then he laughed. Sharp. Quick. Loud enough to stall the moment. Cute, he said. Is this your way of saying you're ready to be reassigned? Lucien didn't laugh. He didn't even blink. He just stared at the card like it had triggered something he wasn't prepared to see. Nobody said anything for 5 seconds. Maybe 6. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The meeting dissolved into slides and numbers. Elliot droned about disruption strategy and cost per movement index. I watched Lucien the whole time. He never looked at Elliot again. That afternoon, I sat alone in my car for 43 minutes without turning the ignition. They laughed. Then they stopped. Cut to 3:12 a.m. The phone buzzed once. A voicemail from an unknown number. A woman's voice. Calm. Precise. By the time you hear this message, they'll already be blaming you. The elevator didn't stop on my floor. Security didn't look at me the same. When I finally reached my office, the keypad blinked red. Access denied. I didn't ask questions. I walked 2 doors down where Lena, head of legal ops, was pretending to scroll through her inbox. She didn't look up. I'm not supposed to talk to you without counsel present. You just did. Silence. In high-stakes rooms, people don't run. They evaporate. 9:12 a.m. Conference, room B3. Underground level. No windows. Only concrete and LED hum. 2 men were already seated. One in a dark blue suit with a Homeland Security badge clipped to his lapel. The other, Harwood Group's risk officer, tapped a pen against a printed email. My name was in the subject line. Bold, red, underlined. Elliot wasn't there. Neither was my counsel. Just a black folder and a printout of an operations continuity file dated 5 days ago. My digital signature was on it. Problem was, I never signed that file, and that version was incomplete. The routing logic I'd built wasn't there. Backup vendors gone. Escalation protocols deleted. It was a copy of a draft I'd trashed months ago. You leaked this? The risk officer asked flatly. I blinked. No. He nodded slowly. Then, Explain why your credential hash was the last one to touch the system before it uploaded to the cloud. I swallowed. Not fear. Calculation. What did they delete before they copied it? They let me go without cuffs. But I knew the damage was already done. You can't outrun rumor once it's printed on paper. 11:48 a.m. Back at my apartment. Curtains drawn. Rain on glass. My phone buzzed. 17 missed calls. 2 from Darius Quaid, CFO. 1 from an unknown number. And then the push alert. $970M merger stalled over internal leak. Operations lead under scrutiny. My face wasn't in the article. Yet, there's a line I used to write on whiteboards when training new risk analysts. Power isn't what you control. It's what you can prove. Right now, I couldn't prove a damn thing. Cut to 1:03 p.m. I logged into a secondary network node. One only a handful of old sysadmins even remembered existed, buried behind maintenance protocols. No direct login. It was still live. There, buried 6 layers deep, was the session log. My credential string, used at 2:17 a.m. Sunday. But the access route didn't come from my IP. It came from a deprecated subnet, one assigned to a compliance analyst who retired 2 years ago. That's not an accident. Someone was manufacturing ghosts. A second window opened on my screen without warning. Encrypted chat. No username. Just a message. Check the Marisol folder. She kept everything. Marisol Pike, former compliance lead. Fired 18 months ago after a whistleblower complaint that never went public. She and I had history. Not trust. Just tension. But she was obsessive. If she kept records, they were hard copy. Offline. Probably in her storage locker, where HR sent her personal effects. I knew where it was. I had the ID from her exit interview notes. Cut to 3:22 p.m. Public storage. No cameras on the inside corridors. The kind of place you pay in cash. Unit 5C. It smelled like old carpet and paper cuts. There were 6 boxes labeled personal. I went for the one marked C, Ops. Inside, a printed log of file version changes, backup drive with metadata trails, and a copy of my own signature on an access log, perfectly forged. That was when the overhead lights clicked off. Not flickered. Clicked. Then silence. Then the sound of a boot step. I didn't wait. Grabbed the drive. Slammed the locker shut. Bolted down the corridor. Cut right. Exit sign glowing red. My chest burned. Door wouldn't open. Second step. Deadbolt. Forced. Outside light. Air. Sirens in the distance. I didn't look back. By the time I reached my car, a new message lit my screen. No contact name. Just a line of text. Stop looking at the files, or the next collapse won't be financial. The first thing I did was ditch the phone. I dropped it into a storm drain 2 blocks from the storage unit. Let it vanish in the dark. If they were tracking me, and by now I didn't believe anything less, they wouldn't use the same line twice. No one warns you that you're the threat. They just act like you are, then wait for you to prove them right. 1:47 a.m. I drove west into the old dock district, somewhere between derelict warehouses and silent cranes. I cut the lights and turned into a gated lot. Code still worked. No one had deleted me from that system. Not yet. Inside, dust silence, a locked room with no Wi-Fi, no HVAC. My old continuity vault. I built it after the 2019 network cascade failure, back when the idea of decentralized backups was laughed out of boardrooms. Not anymore. The generator clicked on with a hard hum. One by one, cold blue monitors blinked alive. I slid the drive from Marisol's locker into the console. What loaded changed everything. There wasn't one continuity file. There were 3. The first, mine. Original. Secure. Time-stamped to the first day of buyer negotiations. The second, scrubbed version. The one used to tank the deal. And the third, an internal buyer-side document titled Redline Directive C. It had a different clause entirely. Not one that removed my authority. One that elevated it. If operational continuity was compromised, if the current CEO was deemed unstable, misleading, or acting outside risk protocols, then control of final integration authority passed to the continuity lead. Me. Somebody didn't kill this deal by accident. They wanted it dead. And they wanted me blamed, benched, erased. I leaned back, heart thudding. The screen glowed like an accusation. My name, typed neatly beneath the words. Transition chain. Final authority, Calder, V. So I asked the only question that mattered. Who benefits? Not Elliot. He barely understood the acquisition layers. Not enough to play with clauses like this. He was loud, reckless, but not stupid enough to orchestrate this level of manipulation. So who? At 2:26 a.m., I opened the old VoIP account I hadn't touched since the Portage acquisition audit. Routed it through a latency mask. No direct trails. Typed one line to the only person who might know. You still keep records of buy-side edits? A minute passed. Then the reply. Who are you protecting this time? 3:03 a.m. Downtown. I parked outside the Harwood Buyer HQ. No movement. Except a flicker. Second floor. A screen on. I didn't think. I moved. Back entrance. Service corridor. I still had my vendor badge. Faded but scannable. The lock buzzed open. Upstairs, lights off. One glowing monitor in a half-glass conference room. And a woman inside. Elena Serrano. Compliance integration lead. Sharp, silent, used to work under me until she jumped sides. She didn't flinch when I stepped in. You always said trust was a lever, she murmured. You just never asked who was pulling it. I didn't smile. You forged my signature. No, Elena. I didn't forge it. Her voice tightened. I re-enabled it. My pulse stopped for a second. She spun the monitor toward me. There it was again. Redline Directive C, activated by her. 1 day before the leak. Why? Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Because I knew what they were doing. And I knew you'd never sign off unless you were cornered. What were they doing? Elena looked me dead in the eyes. They weren't buying the company. They were buying your system. Cut. Hard. 4:08 a.m. In my car again. Engine running. I didn't drive. I sat. The rain returned. So did the feeling. That static pressure behind your ears. That slow drag in your gut when something's watching. I checked the mirrors. Black SUV. Same one from the day before. Parked 2 cars back. Lights off. No plates. I hit the gas. Right turn. Then left. Another right. Engine screaming now. SUV followed. I didn't go home. Didn't go to any place I'd been seen. Instead, I took them where the signal would drop. Under the viaduct. Just for 1 moment. Enough time to hit the emergency relay I'd built 5 years ago. 1 press. A single file sent. To the one inbox no one could scrub. The internal legal Dropbox of the Harwood Buyer Board. Subject line. Continuity lead final authority. That was the moment she understood. The deal didn't collapse because she was weak, but because she was dangerous. 6:08 a.m. I didn't sleep. Didn't need to. Adrenaline is a liar. It convinces you you're fine when your whole world's splitting at the seams. The encrypted email was still open on the burner laptop. Timestamp confirmed, 4:12 a.m. Received by the board's legal drop. They'd seen it. The full chain of control. The clause. My title. The date it was activated. It was real. And now they'd have to act. By 6:31 a.m., the story hit the wire. Breaking. Continuity override triggers clause conflict in $970 million merger. Lucien Kale was named. So was I. What they didn't publish, yet, was that the clause didn't just complicate the deal. It made me the default operational controller of both integration systems, Harwood's and Kale's. A power vacuum filled by the one person they'd spent 3 days trying to erase. 7:10 a.m. I walked into AMC's Federal Liaison Office wearing a gray trench and sunglasses. Not to hide, to declare. This won't stay quiet, I told the receptionist. You'll want a compliance investigator present. 10 minutes later, I was in a room that smelled like plastic and fear. The agent introduced himself as Nolan Reeves. Mid-40s, ex-Stooge, now audit mandate coordination. His tone, surgical. What are you alleging? I'm not alleging, I said. I'm reporting. I have a copy of a modified merger continuity clause that places operational authority in my hands. The company buried it. The buyer activated it. Someone else tried to forge around it, then frame me. He didn't blink, just slid over a folder. Inside, screenshots. Not from my drive. From theirs. Surveillance stills of me entering Harwood at 3:14 a.m., 2 days prior. Except, I wasn't there, I said quietly. That's not my coat. Then who is it? Someone who wants to stay one frame ahead of the truth. He asked for the drive. I didn't give it. Instead, I played the voice memo. Elena's. I knew you'd never sign off unless you were cornered. They weren't buying the company. They were buying your system. His jaw tightened. He stood. I need a name, he said. I gave it to him. Elliot Grain. Cut scene. 8:39 a.m. Back at Harwood HQ, media trucks outside. A perimeter was forming. Inside, the boardroom was sealed. I didn't walk in. I strode. You sent the clause? Lucien asked without looking up. No, I replied. The clause sent itself. You just forgot what happens when it kicks in. Someone coughed. Nervous. Faint. The room was too cold. Lucien's hand hovered over a sleek, silver case. Opened it. Pulled out a folder. Tossed it on the table. It was labeled Calder. Inside, my old contracts. My internal NDAs. Even my emergency contact sheet. This is what you think wins, he asked. No, I said softly. This is what you think buries me. But I don't bury easy. 9:02 a.m. Security entered. They moved to me, then past me, to Elliot. He turned white. You don't know what you're doing, he started. I know exactly what I'm doing, I cut in. I'm letting the process finally work the way we built it. One of the agents whispered something in Lucien's ear. Lucien looked at me for the first time in 48 hours. And he smiled. Not kindly, but like someone who realized too late that the gun on the table wasn't a bluff. 10:14 a.m. Nolan called. They filed for an injunction. Expected. There's more, he said. You need to hear it in person. Cut to 12:03 p.m. Rittenhouse Lounge. Public enough to avoid surveillance. Nolan slid a photo across the table. Grainy. Taken from an airport camera. A man, tall, thin, carrying a gray Pelican case. Recognize him? No. His name's Edgar Blay. Used to work in IT recovery for Kale. Went dark last year. What's in the case? Nolan tapped the table. Encrypted backups of operational assets. All cloned from your system. From your continuity framework. We think he's selling it. To who? That's what we're about to find out. My voice felt distant, even to me. They weren't buying the company. They were cloning it. Nolan's stare didn't move. They didn't want your seat. They wanted your system, without you in it. The warehouse smelled like oil and old paper. Safe house, technically. Disaster recovery site I'd commissioned years ago when no one thought redundancy was worth the budget. Windowless, concrete, generator fed, buried in a zoning blind spot near the river. I limped inside and locked the door behind me. The lights flickered on, one by one, like a pulse restarting. My shoulder burned. The crash from last night hadn't broken anything. But pain has a way of reminding you you're still human when the system expects you to be perfect. I set the Pelican case on the table. Edgar Blaze case. It had taken Nolan 2 hours to intercept him at the airport. TSA flagged the encryption hardware. AMC held him under material witness authority. All legal. Clean. No headlines yet. Inside the case, 3 solid-state drives. Redundant. Mirrored. Tagged with internal naming conventions only I would recognize. My system. Copied. Forked. Stripped of my name. Someone once told me that theft isn't about taking something. It's about pretending you built it first. I'd laughed at the time. Now I understood. 2:11 a.m. I plugged the drives in. The interface bloomed across the screens. Familiar. Too familiar. Like walking into your childhood home and realizing someone else had rearranged the furniture. They hadn't cloned everything. They couldn't. Some dependencies were hard-coded to my logic patterns. My escalation trees. My fail-safe redundancies. That was the mistake. You can copy code. You can't copy intent. I triggered a live integrity check. Green. Green. Red. One branch failed. The buyer-side deployment was already live somewhere else. Not here. Not Harwood. Another entity. Another shell. I felt the pressure build behind my eyes. They didn't want the deal, I said out loud just to hear it. They wanted the spine. A system without a company. A machine without a conscience. 3:04 a.m. Nolan arrived with 2 agents. Plainclothes. Quiet. No sirens. We need you downtown, he said. Emergency injunction hearing. Public. Ballroom level. Who filed? He didn't hesitate. Your own board. Of course they did. Fear makes people side with whoever promises the illusion of safety. Even if it's a lie. Cut. For 17 a.m. Grand ballroom. Center City. Chandeliers still lit. Rows of empty chairs. Cameras setting up in the back. Legal teams clustered like predators around a carcass. I walked in with blood still on my sleeve. The room stilled. Lucien Kale stood at the far end, flanked by attorneys. Elliot Grain sat 2 rows behind him, pale, sweating, eyes darting like a trapped animal. Someone whispered my name. I didn't sit. I stood. Before this begins, I said, voice steady. I'm invoking my authority under the continuity clause triggered at 4:12 a.m. 3 days ago. That authority has not been rescinded, and any attempt to proceed without acknowledgement constitutes procedural violation. A murmur. Sharp. Uneasy. Lucien smiled thinly. You don't get to hijack a federal hearing. I don't, I agreed. The system does. I nodded to Nolan. He pressed play. Audio filled the room. Elliot's voice. Recorded. Clear. Once we move the assets, she's irrelevant. The system will outlive her. Lucien's head snapped toward him. The second clip followed. Grant Forrester, my brother-in-law. Private equity liaison. Family. Will clean the signature trail. She's the easiest variable to isolate. I didn't look at him. Didn't need to. There's a saying I learned too late. Betrayal never comes from enemies. It comes from people who think they own you. Lucien stood abruptly. This is a setup. No, I said quietly. This is documentation. I stepped forward and placed a folder on the judge's table. Inside, the red line directive, the mirrored logs, the live integrity report showing unauthorized deployment of proprietary systems. This deal never needed my approval, I continued. Just my silence. And I don't stay silent when someone tries to sell my work without the cost of accountability. The judge leaned forward. Nolan met my eyes. The room held its breath. Elliot stood. "This is insane," he said, voice cracking. "She planned this. All of it. She." Security took his arms. The sound of cuffs closing echoed off the marble walls. Click. Final. Someone gasped. Lucien backed away from the table. The illusion collapsed fast when gravity finally kicked in. As they led Elliot out, he twisted toward me. "You think you've won," he hissed. "You don't understand how this works." I met his eyes. "I understand perfectly," I said. "Power doesn't ask permission. It just waits for the truth to surface." Outside, dawn broke pale and cold. Nolan walked beside me. "There's one more thing," he said. "The shell entity deploying your system? We traced it." I stopped. "To who?" He exhaled. "A private fund. Offshore. Quiet. Bigger than Harwood. They were waiting for this deal to fail." I nodded once. Of course they were. The real buyer never shows up to the meeting. They wait for the collapse. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. One line of text. "This deal never needed your approval. Just your silence." The air was still sharp when I walked out of the courthouse. Snow flurried sideways. Thin. Silent. Like someone had muted the world for effect. Nolan trailed a step behind me. He didn't speak. Neither did I. Some battles don't end with cheers. They end with a silence heavy enough to fold time. We crossed into the parking garage. Levels empty. Fluorescents buzzing overhead. My breath fogged the windshield before the engine started. As I pulled out, I watched my reflection ripple in the rearview mirror. For the first time in months, it didn't look like a ghost. 3 days later, the Harwood building stood like nothing happened. But everything had. Lucien was removed. Quietly. Board vote sealed and unanimous. Elliot pled out within 48 hours. Prosecutors always prefer leverage over noise. I didn't need to testify. My system was already triggering ripple effects across regulatory agencies, patent claims, licensing blockades. The phantom buyer, the offshore fund, had begun cooperating, which is legal shorthand for, "We'll settle before the fire reaches us." I returned to my office. Not the one they stripped. The real one, hidden behind the lab, past the double redundant fire doors, where servers hummed and no one entered without biometrics. I sat in the dark for a while. Not grieving. Just calibrating. I used to think winning meant being louder than the ones who underestimated you. But silence is where real power lives. I opened the master console, typed in my own credentials. The system lit up. Clean. Intact. Undeniably mine. "You're not going to sell it, are you?" Nolan asked behind me. He'd come in without me hearing. Again. "I thought about it," I said. He leaned against the frame. "You could name any price. Walk." I closed the console. Money's a short game. They never wanted the code. They wanted the leverage. He nodded. "So what now?" I turned. "Now I make the leverage mine." Later that night, I drove back to my mother's house. The porch light was on. She opened the door like she'd been waiting. No words. Just arms. We sat in the living room, wine untouched on the table. "You don't owe anyone anything anymore," she said gently. I looked at her. "No, but I owe myself the truth." The next morning I met with Clara. She slid the manila envelope across the table in the cafe. Inside were names, dates, paper trails, all tied to a trust fund I never knew existed. Set up 2 decades ago. Funded by my father. Siphoned off by Grain and Forrester over years. Not just from the company. From me. Blood doesn't guarantee loyalty. Family doesn't always mean safety. Sometimes the last person they expect is the only one paying attention. I stood outside the cafe after she left. A man across the street lit a cigarette. Watched me. He didn't hide it. Didn't have to. I didn't look away. Some ghosts don't haunt. They observe. waiting for the sequel. I returned to Harwood HQ that afternoon. Not to reclaim it, to dismantle it, one terminal at a time. I triggered the decommission script from the server core, encrypted the entire system with a new key sequence, one only I controlled. They could keep the walls. The system would now live in the cloud, under a new name, with none of the old fingerprints. I wasn't burning it all down. I was evolving it past them. My final act was simple. I walked into the boardroom. Empty. Clean. Like they'd erased history. I placed my old ID card on the glass table. No farewell speech. No explanation. Just a card. It slid perfectly across the surface. A ghost of authority they couldn't touch anymore. Outside, the wind caught my coat as I crossed the plaza. I could feel it, eyes from above. Cameras. Boardrooms. Investors, still trying to salvage a narrative. Let them. You only matter when they can't control you, I whispered to myself. And I don't belong to anyone anymore. I stood at the curb. Taxis passed. I didn't raise my hand. Some destinations don't come with directions. Some power doesn't shout. It just waits. Underground. Unshaken. Ready. The world didn't fall apart when I walked away. But the lie did. And sometimes that's enough. Because silence isn't surrender. It's strategy.